Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. I've done quite a lot of very heavy videos over the past couple of months, so I thought this week we'd dial it back a little bit and do something a little bit lighter. Or at least that was my aim. Researching this case actually stressed me out a lot more than I intended as a self-confessed horse girl. If you're only subscribed for my mystery content and don't watch any of my other videos or follow me on social media, you might not know that my family have had horses my whole life. I love horses. They're my thing, and I love true crime, so this is the perfect mystery for me to cover. Shergar was a thoroughbred, Irish bred and British trained racehorse. He was the most famous and most valuable racehorse in the world back in the early 1980s. He was revered in the British and Irish racing circuits, until one day he was stolen from a stud in County Kildare in Ireland and a ransom was demanded. To this day, nobody really knows exactly what happened to Shergar and who took him, although there are many a theory. But first I want to take a moment to talk about our sponsor of this video, CBS Reality, a channel offering true crime documentaries and series that present a look into some real-life criminal cases as they unravel. You can tune in to watch true crime on CBS Reality every weekday from 8 PM. You'll find back-to-back shows such as Murder for Hire, Evidence of Evil and Written in Blood, available on Sky, Freeview, Virgin and Freesat. It was the 3rd of June 1981 when at just 3 years old, Shergar won the 1981 Derby at Epsom Downs Racecourse by a record 10 lengths in only his second season racing. It was the largest winning margin of any Epsom Derby in the last 200 years. He'd ran his first ever race not even a year before, on the 19th September 1980. Shergar was a horse with a reportedly very good temperament. He was very easy to break, meaning he was easy to train to be ridden. He was also a beautiful looking horse, this big bay colt. Although I couldn't find anywhere his exact height, I would hazard a guess that he was anywhere between 16 and 17 hands. He had a distinctive white blaze down his nose with 4 white socks. He was just a really beautiful horse. He would also happen to race with his tongue hanging out of his mouth, a very distinctive style. After Shergar's monumental win in the 1981 Derby, it was written that he was one of the finest horses to ever exist. That very same year he would win the Irish Derby and the King George VI Stakes at Royal Ascot. It was an exceptional year for such a young racehorse and he was named European Horse of the Year. And then towards the end of the season he came to race at the St Leger at Doncaster on the 12th September 1981, but he actually came in 4th, 11.5 whole lengths behind the winner. There had been rumours floating around that Shergar had been struggling in training, rumours that became obvious once he struggled so much in this race. Shergar was owned by the Aga Khan, a very rich man with an estimated $800 million wealth. Some sources even quote his wealth being as high as $3 billion. His Highness Prince Karim Aga Khan is the spiritual leader of the Ismaili branch of Islam, leading roughly 15 million Ismailis. He's a very unique royal leader, seeing as he does not rule over a geographic territory, just a group of people who primarily live across the Middle East, but also in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Africa, Europe and North America. The Aga Khan was born in Geneva, Switzerland. He grew up in Nairobi, Kenya. He attended Harvard University in the USA and holds both British and Portuguese citizenship. He's known for being a multi-millionaire philanthropist, working towards the elimination of global poverty, the advancement of the status of women, and honouring Islamic art and architecture. He also just happens to be owner now of around 600 racehorses, one of those once being Shergar. After Shergar lost the race at St Leger, the Aga Khan was concerned. It was very unlike him. A series of medical tests were run on the horse and he was shown to be in very good health. He also happened to begin to work well again in training after this, but the Aga Khan was unwilling to risk the health of Shergar any further, so he made the decision to retire him after just 2 seasons at Ballymoney Stud in County Kildare in Ireland. Over Shergar's very short time in horse racing, he earned £436,000 in winnings. Shortly after Shergar's first big win at the Epsom Derby, the Aga Khan sold 40 shares in the horse, valuing it at £10 million. He kept 6 shares for himself and created an owners syndicate with 34 other people. Essentially, 35 people owned Shergar. Once it was clear that he was no longer going to be racing, many people attempted to pressure the syndicate into sending Shergar to stud in the USA, as it was big business over there, and there was a lot of concern that this would be done. But instead the Aga Khan chose to send him to stud at Ballymoney Stud in County Kildare in Ireland. Back in the country he'd been bred and in the country he was revered in. He arrived back in Ireland in October 1981 and was paraded down the main street of Newbridge. And this horse was considered somewhat of a national hero in Ireland at the time. He was one of the most recognisable sports personalities, human or horse, in the country. It made sense to send him out to stud to breed because people would be willing to pay top money for the offspring of such an incredible stallion. His foals were given record valuations. The next year, 1982, was Shergar's only breeding season, in which Shergar bred with 35 different mares. The Aga Khan was able to charge up to £80,000 a time for Shergar's services, and one of the foals produced was later sold for 3.1 million guineas, about 3,255,000. It was a very successful breeding season for Shergar, and they had plans for him to cover another 55 mares in 1983. The amount of money that we made from this one stallion was astronomical. His valuation wasn't priced only on his successes on the racecourse, but also on his kind, gentle nature. He truly was considered to be a one-of-a-kind horse. But then one night, on the 8th of February 1983, everything went wrong. It was just after 8 PM when a group of men entered the house of Jim Fitzgerald, the head groom at Ballymoney Stud, who lived on the property. Jim's son answered a knock at the door to find 3 masked men barging their way in. They said, "We have come for Shergar. We want £2 million for him." Jim was held at gunpoint and forced to lead the gang to Shergar's stable, where they led the horse into a stolen horse box they'd brought with him. Turns out that it wasn't only the 3 men at the door that was involved in this. Jim said up to 8 men were waiting around the scene, all with guns. Jim only remembers one of the men as being particularly aggressive though. 2 of the men then stayed behind to guard the Fitzgerald family, no doubt to make sure they didn't call for help, whilst Jim himself was forced into a car and driven away by another 3 of them. After about 40 minutes, he was ordered to get out of the car, to keep walking, not turn around and not call the police. He was given instructions to give to the representatives of the Aga Khan as to how they could negotiate with the kidnappers. So Jim walked to the next village and called his brother. Once he returned back home and found his family unharmed, a very strange set of phone calls happened. So Jim rang the stud manager, who phoned Shergar's vet, who then rang a former army officer called Captain Sean Berry. The local MP and Irish Finance Minister, Alan Duke, was then awoken by a phone call from Sean Berry. But Alan had to deliver his first budget publicly the next day, so Alan passed the buck onto the Justice Minister. The police weren't alerted until about 4 AM, which I think goes to show how political horse racing is, the kind of people that are involved in this world. They thought it was more important they told the government than the police. Also, I'm sure that Jim was hesitant to contact the police because he was threatened not to, at the risk of his family being hurt. That makes it 8 hours before there was any kind of official search for Shergar. You can drive from the most northern point of Ireland to the most southern point of Ireland in about 7.5 hours according to Google Maps. So in that amount of time, Shergar could literally been taken anywhere in the country, even to a different country. It also very much didn't help that the kidnappers had chosen to take Shergar at the same time that Ireland's major racehorse sale was going on, definitely done on purpose. This meant there were just loads more horse boxes than usual being driven up and down the country. It wasn't possible for the police to stop and search every single one. And there were also further complications because the officers from both Dublin and County Kildare were put onto this case. The 2 forces seemed to believe they were in competition with each other, so it was a race to find Shergar first, which basically meant that everything went wrong. They refused to share information with each other, and also very weirdly, the Chief Superintendent James Murphy, who was in charge of the case, seemed determined to use mediums and psychics to solve the case rather than good old-fashioned police work. The whole search just very quickly became a media circus. Scores of British and Irish journalists descended on County Kildare in an attempt to be the first ones to break any news to the press. But also, the Irish police just weren't taken seriously worldwide. A lot of press just focused on the funny Irish police officer in charge of this case and his crazy admissions about psychics and clairvoyance. The Dublin police offered a £100,000 reward for the safe return of Shergar, but of course this wasn't enough. We know the kidnappers wanted £2 million. It didn't take long after the kidnapping for the kidnappers to make first contact. In fact, it had been before Jim Fitzgerald had even been able to get back to Ballymoney. It was 4 hours after the kidnap, at 12:10 AM, when horse breeder Jeremy Maxwell, who was located near Belfast, was awoken to a ringing phone. The caller said, "We've got Shergar. If you want proof, we'll send you his ear." And they demanded a £40,000 ransom. And of course the breeders didn't take this seriously at the time because nobody knew that Shergar had been kidnapped. There was nothing on the news so quickly. But it wasn't long after this that the BBC office in Belfast also received a call. The caller once again said they had Shergar and would talk to only 3 of London's top racing journalists: Derek Thompson and John Oaksey from ITV and Peter Campling from The Sun. So all 3 journalists were put on a plane to Belfast within hours and were told to go to Maxwell's farmhouse and wait for the phone to ring and negotiations to begin. The first phone call didn't come through though until 1:15 AM on day 2. The journalists had been told that it was of utmost importance to keep the caller on the phone for at least 90 seconds, the minimum amount of time needed to be able to trace where a phone call was coming from. However, when they did manage to keep the line open for 90 seconds, they were told that the man who did the tracing had just happened to gone off duty at midnight. So this was a dead end. There were multiple calls throughout the night, demands for the ransom, and in the morning they received a call. Horse has had an accident, he's dead. But was he really? Whilst all of the press obviously knew all of this was going on, journalists were literally involved, they didn't know that at 3:44 AM, Ballymoney Stud had received a phone call. The caller used the coded phrase King Neptune that had been given to Jim during the kidnap and demanded £2 million in 20, 50 and £100 bills, used notes only. The caller said, "I repeat nothing, do not waste time." They demanded a phone number for the Aga Khan's office in Paris, which was provided quickly. Over the next few days, there were several calls made with a representative of the Aga Khan over in Paris, but it wasn't as straightforward as the kidnappers thought it was going to be, it seemed. They didn't realise that Shergar belonged to a syndicate, 35 people in total. They just thought that the incredibly wealthy Aga Khan would happily hand over the £2 million ransom, and that would be it. But it just wasn't as simple as that. The other members of the syndicate also had to agree to the tactics. Everyone, 35 people, had to be on the same page. Plus, the people who owned Shergar didn't only own Shergar. As we know, the Aga Khan owned a number of other racehorses, and likely so did most of the other people in the syndicate. If they were to cave and pay the money for Shergar, would that make every other racehorse in the country a potential target? How many more of their horses would be kidnapped over the coming months? The shareholders all disagreed on the best way to proceed, and the Aga Khan, an incredibly wealthy man as I said, was very used to being blackmailed and having demands made for money. His policy was to never give in. The representative tells the caller that the syndicate is demanding proof that Shergar is still alive before they hand over any money. This was more of a stalling tactic than anything else, I think. From what I can gather, they never had any intention of paying the ransom. So at 11:15 on day 3, the representative is told that a person not associated with Ballymoney Stud was to go to the Crofton Hotel in Dublin and use the name Johnny Logan at the reception desk. The receptionist would then hand over an envelope containing proof that Shergar was still alive, or so was the plan. So they send in Dan Cosgrove, Shergar's vet and one of his part owners. Only when he approached the desk, there was nothing for Johnny Logan waiting for him. You see, obviously the police had been informed, and so the hotel was crawling with them, and the kidnappers had been unable to deliver the letter without fear of getting caught. But the syndicate was still demanding proof that the horse was alive before they paid anything. So the kidnappers called again and said that this time the proof was at another Dublin hotel, and this time they did deliver. An envelope was picked up containing several Polaroid photos of Shergar, of his head only, and also some including photos of the Irish news from the day before. For Dan Cosgrove, this wasn't quite enough. He said just a photo of the head didn't constitute proof that the horse was alive. He wanted to see the entire body. Again, I think the syndicate was just stalling for time. Just before midnight on the 4th day after the kidnapping, the final call to Paris ended. If you're not satisfied, that's it. The thieves hung up and never made any further attempts to contact the syndicate. And that was it. Slowly, the media interest in Shergar's kidnapping began to wane, and by the end of the year, most of the syndicate's insurers paid out for losses. Not Dan Cosgrove's though, the vets, whose insurance demanded proof that the horse was dead. Apparently just the fact that the horse was missing didn't indicate that it was dead. It could be being kept in a stable somewhere. I think all across Ireland this was the thought, or at least it was the hope. Nobody believed that any Irish man would ever actually kill a horse in cold blood. Why would they not just release him into a field somewhere until eventually someone came across him? there would be nothing lost and nothing gained. It's not like Shergar could talk and tell the police who abducted him. It seemed particularly cold that an innocent horse could be murdered. Over the coming years, Shergar would be spotted everywhere, his disappearance turning into a worldwide game of hide and seek. And then, finally, in the spring of 2000, there seemed to be a breakthrough when a man found a horse skull in a deserted gully in County Kerry whilst cleaning up the area. Upon closer inspection, he found the skull had 2 bullet holes. The skull was then passed on to the police team in County Kildare, who found that the skull likely belonged to a 2-year-old horse, while Shergar was 5 years old when he disappeared. There would be very obvious differences in the skull in a growing horse like that, and therefore it was very unlikely to be Shergar. And so they were back to square one, but it did ignite a new interest in it in the Irish media. And then later, something came out in the media that the police had hidden from the public for many, many years. Apparently 1 week after the calls to Paris stopped, a loaded magazine was found near Shergar's stable at Ballymoney Stud. It was a magazine for a submachine gun, the same type that was often used by the IRA in Northern Ireland at the time. Since this was discovered, possibly even beforehand, the police have worked under the assumption that the IRA were the most likely suspects. Just in case people aren't clear on who the IRA were, I'll give you a very brief explanation. I am planning on doing a video on the Troubles in Ireland at some point soon where I'll go into this in a lot more detail, but the IRA were the Irish Republican Army, an organisation that sought to end British rule in Northern Ireland and reunite Ireland as one big country. They're considered to be a terrorist organisation because of the kind of tactics they use, such as bombings, assassinations, and obviously kidnappings. But by the early 1980s, the IRA was running out of money and they were on the brink of bankruptcy. They relied on cash for weapons and political activity, getting the word out about what they wanted. And their annual budget was estimated to be between £2 and £5 million. And it was pretty much always under financial pressure. Sean O'Callaghan was a senior IRA member in the 1980s, but also unknown to the IRA, he was a police informant. He was working for both sides. According to Sean, in the early 80s, the IRA came up with a kidnapping strategy as a way to earn money. Kidnap notable people, claim ransom money, easy. But with kidnapping people came the concern of these people then being able to later identify their kidnappers, and also it just didn't look very good for the IRA cause. So they came up with the idea to kidnap animals, Shergar, a stroke of genius that at the time made a lot of sense. The sight of the kidnapped victims' families crying on TV was costing them their support in their Republican heartlands. Shergar was just a horse, but an extremely valuable horse, dubbed to be worth £10 million. And the Aga Khan, his owner, was known to be an extremely rich man. It was almost a victimless crime. But the IRA's fatal flaw was when they assumed that the Aga Khan was the sole owner. They didn't know about the syndicate and how much that would complicate the proceedings. Getting 35 people to agree to one plan was always going to be impossible. Plus, I think they overestimated how much the horse was worth personally to their owners. He was a racehorse, a way to earn money. To the grooms and the people who looked after him at Ballymoney Stud, I'm sure Shergar would have meant the world. Had they had the money and owned him, they likely would have paid it. But to most of the people in the syndicate, he was just a way for them to make money. There wasn't that personal connection with the horse, and the kidnappers didn't really foresee this. According to O'Callaghan, the plan was to have distractions. The group calling the journalists and negotiating with them was never intending to get the money that way. That was simply a red herring, something for the police and the media to focus on. It was a group dealing directly with the Aga Khan that was expecting the results. There was also another group dealing directly with Shergar, meant to be caring for him. But the likelihood is that these people had little to no experience with horses, especially a stallion who was in stud, desperate to breed. No doubt they took Shergar just before breeding season on purpose to up the demand to get him back. As I said, his foals were selling for £80,000 a pop. But horses are very smart, smarter than most people realise, and Shergar would have sensed that something was wrong. If the people around him weren't kind and confident, he for sure would have reacted in kind. He would have been scared and for sure would have put up some kind of fuss at these strange men herding him away. Even as somebody who's pretty experienced with horses, I can tell you that I would not want to be dealing with a scared stallion in breeding season. But what actually happened in the hours after Shergar's kidnap is up for debate. O'Callaghan says that he was told that the horse was shot within hours, that the handler simply couldn't deal with him, and that the horse worked himself up so much that he injured his leg whilst being transported. Now these handlers had a scared horse in pain. It was easier for them to just shoot him. They couldn't exactly call a vet to tend for him because any equine vet would instantly recognise him as Shergar. In O'Callaghan's own words, it was a total cock-up from start to finish. But of course we're taking all of this at O'Callaghan's word, but we do know that the police suspected IRA involvement from very early on in the investigation. So we don't know for 100% certainty that it was the IRA, they've never admitted to it. Some say that Shergar was such a calm horse that him going crazy in the horse box makes no sense, but I do think he would have been smart enough to sense that something was going on. The IRA theory is generally accepted as truth here, but some people think that potentially he was taken abroad and sold, perhaps to the Middle East, where horse racing is just as big as it is in Ireland. Some people think that it wasn't the IRA at all, just a random gang trying their luck. Some think maybe it was the IRA, but they simply released Shergar and no one ever realised that he eventually came to own the world's most famous racehorse. I hope that's what happened and that he did have a happy life until the end, just a bit of denial on my behalf. No arrests have ever been made in connection with the kidnapping, and the location of Shergar now will always remain a mystery because no doubt he's definitely now dead. Just to end on that very happy note there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know this one's a little bit different, the kidnapping of a racehorse, but it's one that I've wanted to tell for ages and I just felt like I needed a little bit of relief from the very heavy cases I've been talking about recently. As always, let me know if you've got any requests and put them in the comments down below. Make sure you check out CBS Reality, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.